I'm Larry Steinhouse. I am known as the crazy real estate investor and the crazy options trader. I do a lot of real estate. I do a lot of stock options. So what's the most common question I get asked is probably, which one do I make more money on, real estate or stock options? And everybody looked up, looked at it, wow, cool. And the answer is, one of them. I'll leave it at that. What else was I supposed to say to them?
What are the most commonly asked questions that you get?
Yeah, well, that was one. Is it questions or question? Because that was the most commonly asked question.
Plural.
Plural, okay. The other question is, how do you do a subject to deal? And honestly, you know, I think subject to is a little more complicated, but if you can simply look at a seller and say, if I take over your payments and take over the house, would that work for you? That's all you need to know. If they say yes, find me or find someone who can help you do it. That's the key, getting up the nerve to saying. What else? Well, any more questions? I think that's good, right? That's fine.
You did a fine job. Okay, Beth?
Can you guys see me above the computer screen? I'm here. Beth Stern-Fleming. I'm a real estate and business attorney. Many of you know me and see my responses on the answer line. I've been practicing for about 29 years. I do both front-end real estate, which means any kind of transactional work, leases, financing, buy, sell, partnership agreements, operating agreements, any kind of transaction that you will do. And I also do the back end or litigation, ejectments, evictions, foreclosures, partnership disputes, litigation, etc. And so I can draft any kind of agreement, and I can deal with most types of litigation. The most common questions that I get are, one, if I'm going to start a business, should I start the business in my own name or should I start the business in an entity? And the answer to that depends on your risk adverse, whether you are very conservative or not, and the cost benefit analysis. So if you open a business in the name of an entity, if you are good about making sure that you operate your entity separate from your personal life, you will have protection from your personal assets to the extent that you have a dispute with someone or litigation in your business and there is a judgment against you, you will have protection against your personal assets if you have a separate business from your personal life. However, operating a business in an entity may be more costly because when you borrow money as a business, as an entity, the interest rates tend to be higher. There is a cost of drafting an operating agreement. There is sometimes extra expense with regard to filing tax returns, although if you only have a certain amount of businesses in an entity name, there are some entities like LLCs, you can do your taxes as your personal taxes, but you can only do that with a certain number of entities. But there are expenses to operating a business as an entity. So whether you open a business in your own name or an entity name will depend on how risk adverse you are, as well as how much money you want to save. So it's a personal question for each person that does that. Another question that I am asked is, what do you do when you get a judgment? How do you go and collect that judgment? So if you have, for example, a tenant that doesn't pay you rent, and now you get a judgment for that rent, what do you do? And the answer to that question is you really have to start preparing for that before you sign the lease. And the reason is the more information you get from that opposing party at a time when you are not in an adversarial situation, the better prepared you will be when you get a judgment. So for example, if you're entering into an agreement, a lease agreement or an agreement of sale or whatever the agreement is, you want to get information about that party that you can use later if there's a dispute and you get a judgment. So for example, you want to make sure that you have a tenant fill out an application which gives you all of the tenant's assets, where they have their bank accounts, whatever assets they have. Make sure you get the names of all the parties that are going to be living in the property, all the adult parties that are going to be living in the property. And you want these bank account numbers, the bank and bank account numbers, other assets, so that if in the future they default and you get a judgment against them, you have a map of how you're going to go after these folks. And if you have, for example, a tenant that you sign this contract with, you want to renew that application every so often because they may switch banks, they may get different assets, and again, that's the roadmap you're going to use to go against these folks if you were to get a judgment. I'll leave it at that. Obviously, those are the kinds of things. Answer that question. Which question? When creating the first question? The bottom. Does a judgment expire? If so, how long can I renew it? Okay. So there's a question. Yes. It depends on the state in which you get a judgment. In Pennsylvania, they last 5 years. In New Jersey, it can be 20 years. So it depends on what kind of judgment it is. This is the question, does a judgment expire? The answer, yes. Again, in Pennsylvania, usually 5 years. In New Jersey, 20 years. If so, how can I? It's easy to renew. You can just fill out a form to renew the judgment, and you have to file it. In Pennsylvania, you have to file the renewal of a judgment between 4.5 and 5 years. You can't do it before 4.5 years. You can't do it after 5 years. And it's a very simple form that you fill out and file in the court in which you got the judgment.
Beth, but doesn't the court send you a notice when you're...
Nope. You have to do it yourself. You have to do it. You have to remember to do it yourself. I'll pass to you now.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep. Is that mic 2?
This is yes, mic number 2. Okay, Don Rotanz. I've been a member of DIG since 1989, and I served on the board for 13 years. Started buying real estate in 1986, 32 years ago. Pretty much, all I do is real estate. I'm not a realtor, I'm not a contractor. All I do is I flip like 4 houses a year, and I have 40 rentals. And that's all I ever want to do is real estate. Through. Let's see. Yeah, I bought a lot of houses subject to. Right now, I buy a lot of houses with seller financing. Let's see what else I can tell you. Yeah, I bought VAs, I bought HUD homes, I bought short sales. I've pretty much done everything in real estate. So if you have any questions about anything, if I can't answer, I can tell you who can. Let's see what else. Yeah, and right now I own BuxMont home buyers. I only buy in Bucks and Montgomery counties. I don't buy in Philadelphia. All my rentals are in Bucks and Montgomery counties, except for one that's down in Wildwood. Let's see. Most asked question. I get a lot of questions. I can't find any deals. Where do I find the deals? The market's really slow, and I can't find deals. Well, I have a lot of deals going on. I have a lot of offers out there, and I think most people who tell me that they can't find the deals, I'll ask them, how many offers have you made in the last couple of weeks? well, I haven't made any offers. It's like, well, that's the way I don't have any deals. The more offers you make, the more deals you're going to get. Okay, so, and I was talking with somebody at the last Genius Bar, the last DIG meeting, and he bought a house about half a mile from my house. And he lives like an hour away, and I'm like, darn, I should have bought that house. And I asked him how he did it. They were asking $150,000 for the house. He offered him $100,000, and they took it. And I'm like, duh, why didn't I do that? And so once again, if you're not finding deals, you're probably not making any offers. Don't be afraid to make lowball offers, whether they're auction houses, wholesale deals. People tell me it's like, yeah, wholesalers bring me deals, but none of them make sense. Well, how many offers have you made through wholesalers? Just because the wholesaler's asking $100,000, that doesn't mean you can't say I'll pay $70,000 for it. So if you're not finding deals, you're not making offers. Also, yeah, and once again, I'll tell people, if you're not finding deals, or I'll ask them how are you getting your deals? Well, my realtor usually sends me deals. It's like, well, realtors are too busy to send you deals. You got to make things happen yourself. And drive around your neighborhood, drive around neighborhoods around your town, look for ugly houses. Stick stickies on the doors. Hey, if you're interested in selling your house, let me know. Here's my phone number. You have to do things that other people aren't willing to do. Everybody's waiting around for their realtor to find them deals. You're not going to find deals that way. All right, you got to do things that other people aren't willing to do. Drive around, find houses with really tall grass. Knock on the door. If you're interested in selling your house, give me a call. It's as simple as that. You got to do things that other people aren't willing to do. Everybody and their brothers mailing out their probates and foreclosures. Don't do that. They're not finding deals. Do things that other people aren't willing to do. Let's see, what else? I heard sheriff sales I'm sorry, short sales are back now. And I talked to a couple of investors that are lowballing short sales and getting the deals. This wasn't happening a couple of years ago. It's working now. Don't be afraid to make lowball offers on short sales, MLS houses, and those type of houses.
Hey, Don, can I ask a question? I typed it, but I don't know when you're going to get to that. I have a question based on the stuff you're talking about now. It just happened to me last week. I made a pretty shameless lowball offer, and the realtor was too afraid to present my offer. So how do I get past that hesitant realtor? She was the listing agent. So how do I get past that? It's the first time it's happened to me.
Did she make the offer?
I don't think she did.
I was going to say she's supposed to prevent any hazard.
All right, so I play hardball?
No. Once again, it's illegal. I mean, any offer that you present, she has to present to the seller. Even if she thinks they're not going to take it, she has to present it. She doesn't know all the motivation that seller has.
Exactly.
So she has to present the offer.
So you basically tell her that she is required by law to present that offer. And if you find out that she hasn't presented it, you can bring a lawsuit against her and her brokerage.
But just saying that should be enough, right?
Well, if think about it, if you were the realtor and somebody said that to you, wouldn't it scare you?
Sure, absolutely.
It's a breach of her responsibilities as a realtor. You can fire her for that. She's in breach of her agreement with you.
I can't fire her.
It's a listing agent.
Yeah, I didn't hire her or get her to list this. This is a property that I looked at like Don says, you don't make offers, you don't get anything accepted. So I'm making a lot of offers.
Good.
And, I don't mind saying, hey, making 100 offers to get 1 or 5 or whatever. But so I'm working the numbers.
Do you have a relationship with a real estate agent? A real estate agent is a buyer agent?
I didn't have one. This was the first thing I had touched in New Jersey. I've been just starting recently, and I started in the local area. I live in Doylestown, so I started working in BuxMont, Montgomery County. But this one was near where my mom lives in New Jersey. So I drove past it. I said, let me give it a shot. So that's
typically in things like that. You want to have a relationship. If you're going to use realtors, you want to have a relationship with a realtor. There's a couple in the audience who talk to people, but the reason you want to do that is because you want to know what they're doing, and you want them to understand you and help you make those offers. Personally, if I was your buyer agent, I don't know if anybody else would do this, but if I was your buyer agent and you said you gave me the offer, I may advise you not to make that low of an offer. That's okay. But if you decide that's what you wanted to do, I would hand it over to the other agent. If I got an inkling that other agent did not submit that offer, I'm going around him.
And make it yourself.
I'm going right to the client and saying, did your real estate agent present this offer? And if I find out they didn't, they're going to
Now, is it
I'm going to trouble.
Is it illegal for me to find who the owner is and approach the owner myself?
It's not illegal. And in fact, you can do the whole deal with the owner without the real estate agent. However, the owner has an obligation to the real estate agent to pay the real estate agent
Right.
if you do. That's it.
Got it.
You can do whatever you want. And they can do whatever they want, but they have to pay the real estate agent if the deal goes through.
Sure. Excellent. Very helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
One other thing I'd like to mention, I think it was a good idea that you went right to the listing agent. That's what I do. I think Larry would rather use a buyer's agent. I always go directly to the person listing the house because I think they have I think they want to see the house sold more than anyone else. So when I'm slow, I'll make crazy lowball offers, and I'll call the listing agent of each house and say, yeah, I want to take a look at this listing. Okay, so I always go through the listing agent.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions before I move on to Tom? Okay, Tom.
Tom Gilles, my wife and I, Robin, been investing since '92. Joined DIG in 1996. Basically followed the Don Beck model of rentals, and that's basically all my wife and I do now. Was part-time 16 years, kept a full-time job, and then about 10 years ago, I had to let that go because I couldn't do the rentals, the family, the kids, and everything. Something had to give, and I was making a lot more money with the rentals. So let the day job go. Currently, about 110 rentals. We're actively in the painful process of trying to find property management so I can have some freedom and quality of life back. Because one thing the gurus do not tell you is, yes, you do have financial freedom with the rentals, but you tend to lose personal freedom. And I would like to get personal freedom back. It's been quite a challenge, and it's a real learning experience making this transition over to property management. It's new for me to be managing other people in that sense. Not something I was typically comfortable with, but if I want a quality of life in a business that will run without me being present, it's something I'm going to end up having to do for myself and my family. As far as the most frequently asked question, what do you think about flips versus rentals? And that's really not much of a question for me. Rentals every day of the week. Why would you fix up a house just to give it to somebody and then give 30% of it away to Uncle Sam? Rentals, you get to keep all the income, you fix it, you have all the benefits, passive loss, and very easily find yourself in the 0% tax bracket. A lot of upside to have rentals. The most challenging part of the rentals is not finding the properties, not financing the properties. The most challenging part of the rentals is to work with the people, still keep a positive outlook and not become a people hater, and keep your sanity. So that's, in a nutshell, that's pretty much what we do, and most frequently asked question I get.
Hi, I'm Mardi Harrison. Together with Don Brown, we run Funding for Flippers, and I want to apologize to all of you in advance because I'm fighting a terrible head cold tonight. And sometime during the evening, I am bound to make some very nasty noises at this end of the table. I'm sorry, I can't help it. What? You making sounds about me? I was an attorney for 25 years, but before you start throwing questions at me, I was an employment lawyer. So if you get sued by a tenant on a discrimination claim, I can maybe help you out. But if you have any real estate questions, you go to her because she's the best. So Don sold his business 4 years ago, and we took the money that we got from the business and decided that rather than put it into the stock market like a lot of our friends were doing, we'd rather find something that we thought was a better investment, and we decided to invest that money in you. We decided to invest that money in real estate rehabs. Since we made that decision about 4 years ago, we have invested in almost 200 projects, and we really have developed a passion for what we do. Because for us, it just seems like this whole industry is a win-win-win-win-win-win. It's a win for that poor little house that really needs to be fixed up. It's a win for the sellers of that house because they need the money so that they can get on with their lives. It's a sell for the neighborhood because now that house is going to be fixed up and can become a contributing part of the neighborhood. It's a sell for the community because the tax base is increased. It's a win for the flipper because the flipper is going to make some money. It's a win for us because we're going to make some money. As far as I can tell, everybody all down the line is a win-win-win-win, and it makes us just feel really good that we can be a part of that cycle. So that's what we're doing now, and we hope to be doing well into the future. What's the most obvious question that I get asked? Well, we only ever get asked one question. We get asked, what are your rates? But I think that's the wrong question to ask, because I know what we're looking for is we're looking for a relationship with our borrowers. We're looking for what Don and I call the serial flipper, the guy who's, or a woman who's going to flip a house, sell it, flip the next house, sell it, flip the next house, sell it. Maybe they want to expand so that they're flipping 2 or 3 properties at a time, and that's why they need the extra money. They can fund the first one, not so much the second one. We're looking to build a relationship with them, and I hope that they're looking to build a relationship with us. So the first question I think you should be asking is, are these lenders people that I can work with? Are they going to work with me? If I run into a tough time, are they going to support me and help me out, or are they going to pull the loan? You know, I think that's the central question. Or as somebody I know used to say, first let's fall in love and then we'll talk dowry. So yeah, we can talk about our rates, you know, our rates are competitive. But I think it's more important that we talk about our relationship. And that's why if you go to a bank, they're going to give you lots of forms to fill out. They're going to request lots of paper from you. They want your tax forms, and they want your bank statements, and they want your company's financial sheets, because they process a lot of people, and they have a lot of people within the bank who process. So they have to develop a consistent, objective standard by which to judge you when you come in. They can't take a lot of time to talk to you. And besides, you know, one person talks to you this way, one person talks to you that way. A bank can't function that way. But a private lender can. And that's what we prefer to do. We're not so interested in the paper. We're interested in you as a person. So we will spend significant time with you, getting your story, finding out why you're doing this. Where do you plan to go with it? What are your goals? How are you getting there? Who are you working with? Because all those things are important to success in this industry, we think. So that's our philosophy. We think the relationship is what's important. The rest of it falls into place. And if you have any other questions besides rates, I'm here for you.
Okay, so now you've heard from our panel. Are there any questions from the audience before we begin, or I can start with some of the questions on Slido? Raymond, do you have a question? Please go to the microphone. Tell us who you are, please.
Raymond Lemire.
Wow.
Maybe that's not me. There we go. Marty, I just also want to add, one of the great things about working with private lenders is you're speaking to the decision maker. So if you go to a bank, the person you're speaking to and applying to doesn't make the decision, and people don't realize that really the person you're applying to is a salesperson, and they want you to get the loan as much as you do, but they don't have the final say. Whereas you work with a private lender, the person you're speaking to is a person that's going to say yes or no, and they will explain the reason why it's yes or no. Whereas with a bank, if they say no, that person really can't explain it. And the other important thing about private lenders is speed. So you can work really fast, a bank can't work fast. So it's just another thing. And I had a question, Tom, when you were talking about looking for property managers, can you talk about, you were saying it's a nightmare. Can you elaborate on what you're looking for with a property manager and what are the problems and what you're looking at? Thanks.
Getting to Raymond's question about the property management challenges, I would have to say what I'm sorely come to recognize is a lack of systems within these organizations, and now recognize that one of the early questions to ask is how many units is the company currently managing, and what is your staff, and who is doing your marketing, who is show me the person who's taking those respondents that are responding online, who's calling them, who's pre-screening them, what questions are you asking them, what's your final list look like, where are you getting your pictures for these, which other agent brings those pictures in, do you run out for every showing, or do you pre-screen people and only show a certain amount? How often do you release checks monthly? Are you a 1 check a month company, 2, 3? It's all over the place. What's your lease up fee? What are your rates? All over the place. Do you charge for every little thing? Some do, some don't. Are you competent? Things that you would think are just, it's amazing. Things that I guess just from doing it for 25 years, it's just normal for me. But we started with one company. We got them about a third of our rentals, and it all fell apart this month. Slight load, and the wheels fell off the thing. Apparently, no system, not enough staff. They refused to use Facebook to market. I said, do you realize it's 2018? It's amazing. I really do want to make that work, because if I can get that to work, this system now runs without me. I really want to put the effort into that. There's an awful lot of upside to that. But I don't want to find myself back in the situation that we're in now, where I'm having to start all over again. And this past month was very stressful for me. It was stressful for my wife. And it just wasn't what we were looking for. So asking a lot more questions now. I may scare the living daylights out of the people with the questions I'm asking, but they're obviously going to know, oh, wait a minute, this guy actually knows what we're supposed to do. Because I've been told by some, I don't want you as a client. I only want doctors and lawyers. Well, because they don't know any better. They've never managed property.
Annie, come on up to the microphone, please.
I had a question for Tom. You mentioned in your introduction about taking a paper loss and being in the 0% tax bracket. Do you have a plan for what you're going to be doing when your 27.5 years depreciation is up? Are you going to be every 30 years 1031 exchanging, or are you going to be just not taking the depreciation? And
that is a very good question. Very good, very good pick. We're still actively buying. A lot of the properties that we've had 20 plus years, the market back in the 90s, these things were like a third of what they're going for now. So the depreciation cycle on those was a lot lower. We just picked up one a month and a half ago in Souderton, a 6-unit building. Lots of depreciation there. In addition to that, it's also a very prudent idea to get a very competent accountant who has a lot of different strategies that they can employ so that you can take advantage of all the tax rules that are there to minimize your tax burden. There's things like cost segregation studies. You can set up a separate property management company and run a lot of things through there that you can write off. There's new tax laws this year about vehicles. I believe Don had a meeting a couple of months ago. New vehicle purchases, the first year, $10,000 loss. Second year, $16,000 paper loss on a vehicle for the company. So finding competent counsel with attorneys and accountants is definitely a must. It's certainly not the kind of thing that you'd want to do yourself.
Go ahead. Figured I'd, like, hello, teacher.
He wants to be the next speaker in the group.
Okay, Rob Lawfer again. I need some clarification. Maybe I was only half listening about what? Heckling. When you're looking at a property, it already has a for sale sign on the lawn, and you were saying that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I can either go and contact the owner of the property or the listing agent and lowball. Am I lowballing them, or legally contacting the owner of the house and talking to them directly? I mean, how did that work again? I missed that.
So the seller has an obligation to the agent.
Right.
You don't. You can do whatever you want. You knock on the door and you talk to the seller. The seller should say to you, talk to my real estate agent.
Right.
But if they decide not to, which they probably won't, you have every right to talk to them. You can negotiate the entire deal right there. And I mean, you can even put it in writing right there. You can be done with it right there. You have no obligation to a real estate agent whatsoever. Only the seller does. So you may make a concession. I've done this before. I made a concession where I said, "Listen, I'll give you a realtor this much money. Let's make this deal between us. I'll give you a realtor $5,000 or whatever it may be."
You pay the realtor?
Well, you negotiate anything you want to negotiate, right?
Right.
So it's hard as a real estate broker. It's hard for me to advise someone to cut their agent out.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, it's ethically wrong. It's it goes against my profession. But I would say to them, look, it's between you and your realtor. You do what you have to do, and I'll tell you what, I'll pay this much money towards it. It's part of the deal. It could be zero. It could be $5,000. It could be $2,000. I offered one guy once $2,500 or manage the property for a year, and he was wise enough to say he'll manage the property for a year, and that was what he decided to do as a realtor. I made the deal with the client. We did everything. It was a subject to deal. We did everything around the realtor, but the realtor knew about it. And he decided to be the property manager and make more money being the property manager than he would have if he sold the property. In fact, we were conveying the property for $1, and I told him he really didn't want 0.06 cents. Right?
Yeah.
So that was why he decided it was better. It was a better move for him the other way. But yeah, you have every right to talk to the seller. The seller has every right to talk to you. It's just that they have an obligation. They signed a contract with a listing agent to pay them if the deal sells.
Thanks, Larry.
Any other questions? Okay, so
all right, apologies. As you can hear, there's a lot of hum and feedback from that speaker, so I'm trying to put another speaker up. That's what I'm doing in the back here. Let me go through a couple questions that are on Slido that somebody can answer. So the first question that comes up is from Anonymous, whoever Anonymous is. When does it make sense to get my own real estate license? Who would like to take that one? Don?
Yeah. I don't have my real estate license. I did a long time ago. You don't need a real estate license to flip houses or to have rentals. It'd be nice to have access to the MLS for comps and for your marketing list, but you could always be an unlicensed assistant for that. So no, you don't need your real estate license. Because a lot of people will ask, to have access to Trend. Should I get my real estate license? You can get access to Trend by being an unlicensed assistant. You don't need your real estate license. And also, I heard this in downfalls of having your real estate license. When I'm going into somebody and offer them $75,000 for their $150,000 house, if you have your real estate license, you're held to a higher standard if they should ever come back and say, you ripped me off. So that's my 2 cents. So someone else up here might feel differently, but that's
I actually disagree.
Okay.
But since you had your hand up.
Thanks, Larry. I take the same tactic Don does. I don't have any certifications in anything. I let every certification I ever have expire. I don't plan on ever getting certified in anything. I don't know anything at all. I'm just a dumb landlord, and I just want to buy your property, and here's what I would pay you. I don't know anything, but here's the money. Would you like to do the deal or not? And I can't be held accountable to any standard for, being an agent, a repair that's done, or how something's done. It's, I don't know. I'm just a regular citizen. No special training, no special knowledge, no certifications, so you can't hold me to any standard.
And all of that is true. And I agree with those points. But there's a bigger picture to getting your real estate license. First of all, if you're in this business, just going to the real estate school to get your license, you will learn a lot about the business. So just because you sit in classes for 5 days, you will learn about things you never even knew about. Like the most important things, riparian rights. Real estate agents will laugh at that, but you will learn those things. The other thing too is if you get your real estate license, you are held to a higher standard, and you have to make sure that every single person you talk to, if you go to buy the property, you let them know you're a real estate agent. That will help you in your liability. So the first thing I do is I walk in, especially in wholesale deal, I'll walk in and say, hey, listen, what's your name? Sebastian, just want you to know, I'm a real estate agent, but that's not why I'm here. And then I've already said it, I'm already done, I move on, and I go right to, I'm here to buy your house. So as long as you're honest, and you have to put it down in your contract that you're a real estate agent. Now, as most of you guys know, I buy everything in trust. So if I buy something in trust, and I buy, let's say, 123 Main Street Trust, I then put Larry.Steinhouse trustee, a licensed Pennsylvania real estate broker. And if it's in the contract, I've discussed it, all of it, it's all clear. That's how I keep myself from getting in trouble. The other thing too is if you're going to get your real estate license, don't hang it with, and you want to be an investor, not a real estate agent. If you want to be both, it's one thing. But if you want to be just an investor, go find a company that gives you 90 to 100% commissions, that doesn't charge you much to hang your license there, and may or may not give you training. You're not, if you want to be a real estate agent, you want to go with a company that gives you training. You want to learn how to be a really good real estate agent, and also you will learn how to market. There are certain companies that teach you marketing. But if you just want to have your license just so you can go on the MLS, or just so you can do an occasional deal, look, I make an extra $30,000 to $40,000 a year for people begging me to be their real estate agent because I don't even want to do it anymore. It's just about people who have rental, they have investment properties and they either want to sell them or buy them, and they come to me, and I'm kind of forced to be their agent. So after a while, you get a reputation as a real estate investor, and you'll make a little extra money doing it. But again, just make sure that you let everyone, it's full disclosure that you are a real estate agent. If you're doing that, you're good. You're within the law.
When we decided to get into this business, I went and got my real estate license. We wanted to have access to the MLS because we do check comps on every project that we get involved in independently. We like to think we're another set of eyes on that project for you to double check it for you and make sure that your numbers are right. And then I went to work for Keller Williams for a year because they have the most awesome education program that I've ever seen. And if you really want to learn about what real estate sales and buying and processing and what's in the agreement of sale and all the little details you have to know, I really recommend their program very highly. And it has stood me in good stead ever since.
Did you take advantage of that?
No, I actually sold a house during that year.
Okay, so thank you guys. So Igor, raise your hand, Igor. You're still here? Okay. So Igor asks, what are the top 3 factors that you use to decide between, maybe we already covered this, holding on to your rentals versus selling or 1031 exchanging them specifically in a seller's market? Who would like to cover that one?
Okay, I guess when I buy a house, is it going to be a flip or is it going to be a rental? I guess it all depends on the price range of the house. You know, like this one in Doylestown I'm doing, it's worth $325. I can get like $2,000 a month rent for it. It's an easy decision. I'm going to flip it. But if I'm buying a house subject to or with seller financing, it's probably going to be a rental. Yeah, I think it's pretty much delineated by the house you buy. If it's in, you know, anything under like 200,000, it's probably going to be a rental. Anything over, it's probably going to be a flip, because it just wouldn't make sense. The cash flow just wouldn't make sense. 1031 exchanging, I guess I'm not doing any of those. I'm just, the rentals I bought, I'm just holding on to. And probably within the next, I don't know, probably 10, 15 years, I'm going to probably start selling them. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
It's more for your long-term rentals. That's not, sorry.
I'm not that tall. No, I was just asking this for more properties that you've already owned for some number of years or whatever, the properties that you have, not necessarily new acquisitions.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess I'm just keeping my rentals because this is like a front-end load and a back-end load when you sell them and buy something else. It's just too many closing costs, so I'm not going to 1031 anything. Yeah, I mean, other people might feel differently, but I'm just going to keep them long-term. Are you going to 1031 any of yours, or?
On a rental that we had in Schwenksville. The only reason we did was because the tenant that was there for 20 years moved out, and we had bought that when we were interested in possibly picking up more rentals over there. We have nothing else over there. It's nowhere near where our other stuff is. It was oil heat with no ability to get natural gas, and it had a well. Two of the things that we weren't interested in. So we did choose to 1031 that, and we 1031 into a modern house, but same kind of price range, but directly in the corridor where we have our other rentals in Quakertown. So it was basically the similar kind of a structural as far as the rental amount, but just making it more centrally located. That was the only reason for selling it, and getting away from the oil heat, because with a rental, oil heat and a well are just not great. But the people that were there for 20 years, they didn't really care.
Well, hopefully we answered it.
Does that answer your question, Igor? Yes. Okay. So Anonymous asks, how do you become an unlicensed assistant to get access to the MLS?
You want the legal answer or the reality answer?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So here's the legal answer. You have to be an unlicensed assistant, which means you need to find a real estate agent and work for them. That's the legal answer. Have I already answered the illegal answer?
Get a little closer to the mic, Larry.
Okay. I know of agencies who've gotten in a lot of trouble for this, where they have unlicensed assistant licenses to trend, and they almost lost their trend rights. So the company was almost shut down because of it. It's happened to several companies I know of. One had about 40 unlicensed assistants and got in a lot of trouble. What? Yeah, we're not going to talk about it. It's not, I didn't mention Keller Williams either. It wasn't that. Anyway, so no, so they got in a lot of trouble. So if you find someone who's willing to take the risk and make you their unlicensed assistant when you're not really their assistant, that's fine. And then you're paying trend dues and you're reporting to them. And if you do anything screwed up, they can lose their access to trend, and actually the entire company can be in trouble. So that's the reality answer. Look, it's always a matter of interpretation, right? So the question was, if you're going the legal route, do you have to be a full-time assistant? It's a matter of interpretation. If you walk into the office and say, "Hi, Joe," and then walk out, and maybe that's a legal interpretation. We'll let the lawyer, handle that one. I mean, I happen to know one of the companies that got in big trouble. The licensed assistants, some of them they had never even met. So they really crossed the line. It was bad, and unfortunately, even even when you read the rules, you can't interpret it. It doesn't really tell you what they are. So again, the reality is go find an agent that you're buddy with and ask him to make you an unlicensed assistant. If he's willing to take the risk, great. Just understand that not his license, because his license is underdoing it, but his access to trend is at risk if you screw up. And he should know that too. That's all.
Of becoming a licensed agent, there are costs associated with that because you have to hang your license at an agency, and the agencies charge, at least the ones I know about, all charge a monthly fee for the privilege of having you do that. The fees vary. I'm familiar with between $95 and $125 a month for that privilege. You have to pay for your MLS membership. You have to pay for 14 credits of continuing education every 2 years. So there are costs associated with it. But to my mind, for the privilege of being able to access the MLS, it's worth it. And then you don't have to depend on your friendly neighborhood realtor to be their assistant until maybe they get mad at you or they lose their MLS privileges.
Yeah, there's also another cost is the National Association of Realtors through your local realtor board, which either be Bucks or Montgomery in this area. There are some companies who you do not have to be, they're not members, so you don't have to pay for your membership. So, so that may be another thing is seek out companies who are not part of the Bucks County Association or the Montgomery County Association. It will save you money. You won't have to pay an extra $550 a year to become a board member, to become a member of the board, which frankly, I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah, I'm not with one of those. I'm with one of the ones who requires you to be a member of the Board of Realtors. But on the other hand, the board offers very inexpensive CE programs.
The CE program is $75 for 7 hours.
They have them for 30.
Oh, okay. All right. So pay $550 and you can pay half price for CE credit.
So I don't know if we asked that question, but did you get the answer you wanted? Was that asked by anybody in the room?
Yes.
Okay. So Robin, our only non-anonymous person here, asks, when creating a PA-based LLC that will not have any real estate holdings, what are some of the important terms and clauses to include in the operating agreement? Robin, do you want to clarify that in any way, or is that? I was
going to say that's probably me.
Okay, go ahead.
So if I'm going to answer this for an entity that has more than one owner, okay? So if you have more than one owner, one of the very important kinds of terms that you should have, there's lots of them, so I'll say a couple of them. One is, if one of the owners, if you have a dispute with each other, how do you deal with the entity? So in other words, is there, you want to make sure that you have provisions that talk about how you deal with a dispute. So for example, one way to deal with a dispute would be to require that you go to mediation, or you got to have, if it's two members, you got to have a way to deal with a tie. Okay, so for example, if you're dealing with a decision and one member wants to do one thing and another member wants to do another thing, how do you deal with that tie? Okay, if you both own. And one way to deal with it, it's more expensive, but one way to deal with it is to require the entity to go to mediation or go to arbitration. Or another way is to hire an institutional third party to break that tie. Another way to deal with it is to have a friend that you both trust that's going to break that tie. That you can, but you're taking a risk, right? Another important provision that you want to put in there, if one of the owners does something bad, steals from the company, does something dishonest, commits a crime, those kinds of things,
there should be in that operating agreement a way that the good guy, the good person that didn't commit the crime or do the bad thing, can force the other guy out. I can't tell you how many times I've had a situation where there is an entity, one of the owners commits a crime, steals from the company, and you can prove it. You have a smoking gun. And the good person cannot force the other person out because there's nothing in the contract that says, if you steal from the company, I can buy you out. I can force you to sell me your part of the company. And that happen. Everybody says it's never going to happen. We're best of friends, or it's never going to happen. We're brother and sister. It's never going to happen. Yeah, it happens. And you want to have the provision there that says that if you do this bad thing, and there are a number of bad acts that I typically put in my agreement, and if you do this bad thing, I can force you to sell me your ownership, and this is the way that we're going to determine what the price is. And the price is always, when you have a bad act, what I call a bad act, it's always a discounted price. And so that the good person doesn't have to spend a lot of money to buy the other person out. It's always a discounted price. So those are just some of the very important provisions that you should put in an operating agreement.
Can you say something if it's only one member?
Come to the microphone, please.
So the question was, I'll just repeat the question. If it's only one member, okay? So in those situations, the question you have to ask yourself is, what are the odds that over time you're going to have other people come into the business? For example, your kids or a spouse. And to the extent that you are going to have other people come into the business, then you're going to want those same provisions. If it's really going to be an entity that you and only you are going to own for time immemorial, then those kinds of provisions are not as important. And the important provisions are the provisions which show the world that this is an entity that is separate and apart from you, okay? So that if somebody goes to do what we call pierce the corporate veil, you've got the right things in your operating agreement, which you can then show to the world, your bank or whoever it is that's trying to pierce the corporate veil. This entity is separate and apart from my person. Okay.
Any questions on that? Thank you. Thanks, Robin.
Yes.
You going to say something, Larry?
I have a question for Beth on that. How many meetings or minutes do you need to prevent yourself from piercing the corporate veil?
So in order to not have corporate veil, it's now entity veil, because not everybody's a corporation, right? So the law actually says, in the law, the entity law in Pennsylvania, well, actually, in Pennsylvania specifically, but there's a new model law in many states now about entities and what you need to have an entity. It used to be that LLCs, were relatively new entities, and there wasn't a lot of law. Now, obviously, it's been however many years, but with regard to LLCs, you really don't even have to have minutes. Okay, corporations were required. I don't know how familiar everybody is, but a corporation, which was the entity, years ago, there were no LLCs and LLPs and all these other types of entities. And a corporation, in order to have a corporation and have a corporation treated as an entity, you had to have a minute book. You had to have an annual. There was only one annual meeting. Okay, unless your operating agreement said differently. You had to at least one annual meeting, and sometimes you had to have meetings about very important decisions about the corporation. And so you would have to at least have the owners of the corporation meet at least once and decide who the officers and directors of the corporation, who were the board of directors, who was the officers, and any substantial decision that that corporation was going to make that year. LLCs do not actually have to have annual minutes. That was unclear until this new law passed, I guess it was in 2017, which now says, the law now says in Pennsylvania and some other states, you don't have to have corporate minute book if you're an LLC. You don't have to have annual meetings. Some folks choose to have those formalities because they think that it makes the argument of having a separate entity versus your person, it makes that argument stronger. But it does now say in the law that LLCs do not have to have those formalities.
So if you had an LLC from 2015, would you need to show 2015 and 2016's minutes?
So, so the question becomes, now that the law says you don't need that, did you need it previously? And my guess is, if it were me, I would say, yes, you should have it because it's only going to help you. Sure. And like I said, some people feel more comfortable, even though they have an LLC, still having corporate minutes every year. So depends on your, how much time you have and how much you're going to spend money, perhaps having a lawyer do corporate minutes. It is, it certainly shows formality and shows that the entity behaves differently than you as a person. Yes.
I know some people have numerous properties not in an LLC, and others have many properties in one LLC or numerous. For the people that don't have any entity at all, would an umbrella policy be enough protection should something awful happen?
Well, I can tell you this, that so the things that you have to think about, and because I'm a lawyer, I see, because I have clients that come to me about, something horrible happened at one of their properties. They have an insurance policy, but the insurer refuses to cover them. And I see it because that's who I am. I get those folks. So you have to think about the issue of whether you are comfortable with the insurance company doing what they say they're going to do, insuring, providing coverage to you, okay? I will tell you as a lawyer, and Marty probably can attest to this, as a lawyer, when you're in law school, all you do is read about cases where the insurance companies deny coverage, okay? You think that they're in business, and I'm sorry for any insurance people out there, but, insurance companies deny coverage. And so the question is, how comfortable are you? If you make sure that that you're paying the right amount of premium and you're comfortable with your insurance company that they're going to cover you, then, you're taking less of a risk. You make sure you're disclosing everything to your insurance company. You make sure you're comfortable that the company has a good reputation, is going to cover you. You make sure that you're getting, the coverage. Remember, so for example, people come to me all the time and they're upset that, they've got student housing and they're paying exorbitant premiums. Well, the point is, if some student has a party and gets drunk and, falls down the steps, like happened in, I don't know which college it was, that the kids fell down the step and died, there's going to be a big lawsuit. There's a fire because somebody, was cooking on the stove and fell asleep or whatever. So the question is, how much do you need? What's the coverage that you need? It depends on the type of housing you have. Did you make sure that you got valid coverage? Okay.
Can I add something, Beth, if you don't mind? And I'd like to move on because we're kind of running short. Kenny, just for your dining and dancing pleasure, when you get a chance, go home and Google 17 perils of insurance. Because all insurance, there are a maximum of 17 perils that insurance companies will insure. And make sure that the policy that you get covers the perils that you want. Because every insurance company insures a different combination of perils depending on their policy and what the sales guy is trying to sell you and all kinds of nonsense like that. And believe me, if you read those 17, one of them is lightning striking through your roof or crazy stuff, but it's all real and you got to make sure you're covered. So let's move on to another. 17 perils, P-E-R-I-L-S, not pearls. 17 perils for insurance.
Dangers.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's move on here. Anonymous.
Husband and wife be considered one entity by the entireties for the purposes of ownership of an LLC, and if they can, should they?
I'm not sure I understand. I will say that a husband and wife who own a husband and wife own property in the form of ownership is called tenants by the entirety. Okay, that is a separate form of ownership, and that ownership is different than any other kind of owner. There's what we call joint tenants, tenants in common, and tenants by the entirety. And tenants by the entirety is a separate entity, but I'm not sure of the other part of your question. I'm not sure what you're asking when you say, can they?
You have to talk about who the owner of the LLC is. Can the husband and wife be one owner as tenants by the entirety? And if they can, should they?
Okay. So they can be an owner.
Explain tenants in the entirety.
Okay.
She just did.
Yeah. Tenants by the entirety is just a form of ownership that a husband and wife have. When you are a husband and wife, you own things by tenants in the entirety. And in Pennsylvania, not in other states, but in Pennsylvania, that form of ownership, tenants by the entirety, is protected very much. So that if there is, and this is the way we explain it, if there's a creditor that one of the spouses owes money to, okay, that creditor cannot, if that creditor gets, let's say you have Mardi and Don, okay, are married and they own property, they own it as tenants by the entirety. If Mardi owes money to Mr. ABC, Mr. ABC cannot, in Pennsylvania, go after any property that is owned by Mardi and Don, because the tenants by the entirety is considered separate and apart from just Mardi or just Don. Okay, that's not necessarily true in other states, but in Pennsylvania, it is very true. With regard to your question about an LLC, yes, you can own an LLC in the name of, a husband and wife. But I would say that all those things that I talked about in an operating agreement where you have two owners would apply to that tenants by the entirety, because they can get a divorce, right?
They could.
Yes, they could. And so I would say.
I mean, not us, but they
not
could.
You. Of course not you, but it can happen, right? And so I would say yes. And in fact, many spouses own businesses together, and they own them as husband and wife. And I would just say that they need to treat that entity as an entity that is owned by two individuals. In other words, protect themselves for the instance where they could get a divorce, and how do you split the company? How do you deal with that issue?
it's gonna have to be dealt with. You gotta think about what would happen if you get a divorce.
We don't have time right now, but if we have time later on, we'll cover the answer to that question relative to trusts, which I know is your favorite topic. Larry, don't say anything. Lynn, do you have a question?
Trust me, I won't.
Lynn Burkholder, subgroup groupie. To piggyback on what you said, there is a technical way to get that money from the wife if the wife simply owns it, but it involves knocking off Don. So it's a technicality, but it happens. I don't know how many units you have to own before I can go trout fishing every day like Tom. No, my semi-legitimate question, once I forgot.
Was that a question?
This is for the attorneys. It probably is represented, I know, at least by one of the gentlemen on stage too, because we talked about it. But you always run into a problem where you make an offer, the little old lady accepts it, then she says, let me run it by my lawyer, and they come back and the lawyer thinks it's worth more and he wants to give it to his or her brother-in-law or something. So from your perspective, what's your obligation and to that person when they bring you an offer that's already agreed upon?
Contracts are signed, they sign both, the seller and the buyer.
No. You made an offer, they accepted it. They say, they say, based on taking it to my lawyer, I want to know what the lawyers are doing from lawyers to screw me.
If they
The lawyers are working for their clients.
Exactly.
If the person says, I accept it subject to review by my lawyer,
Right.
then there's not even an oral agreement, okay? If the person says, I accept, okay, and then they take it to the lawyer after they said, I accept, the question is there an oral agreement which can be enforced? And the problem with oral agreements is that they are difficult to enforce because you're going to say one thing, they're going to say another thing, and if it ever came to a judge, the judge has got to decide who to believe. So I would say that get it in writing before you go and try and enforce it.
Well, even if it is and it's not executed with signatures, what's the lawyer's responsibility if you've already come to a meeting of the minds? You know what I mean? Because
the lawyer's responsibility is to represent their client, okay, and to give their client their best advice, okay? And so if the problem you have to remember is the client is not saying to the lawyer, most definitely, the client's not saying, I already agreed to this with Mr. Smith. That's not what the client's saying. The client's saying, Mr. Smith offered me this, what do you think I should do? Therefore, the lawyer is not faced with the same quandary that you're asking me. The client's not saying, I already agreed to this, what do I do? The client's saying, what's your advice? What should I do? As if there was not already an agreement. And that's why the lawyer is then getting involved.
all right, so what can I do on the front end? So the lawyer just has to make sure that everything's done legally to protect
See if you can
their
get
client.
it in writing before they go to the lawyer.
That's one thing, and you have to counsel.
Larry, closer to the mic, please.
You have to counsel your seller on how to approach their attorney. You have to say, listen, I guarantee you when you go to your attorney, they're going to say, oh no, subject to is illegal. You don't want to do that. And they're wrong. They don't know anything about it.
Well, not necessarily even subject to, I'm just talking about taking an offer.
So the offer. So the same thing. You get it in writing. Now, I would do the entire contract. I say, well, I want to run it by my attorney. That's fine. Sign here. Let me put in the contract that you have 3 days to run it by your attorney. At least you have something in writing. Two things are going to happen. One is they're just going to forget about it, not even go to the attorney, so you have it already in writing. The other thing is now you're going to get a phone call from the attorney because now they have to get out of the contract. It's harder to get out of a contract than it is to keep you from getting in the contract. You with me?
Yeah, but I'm thinking that most people, though, won't sign it until they run it by their lawyer.
So I counsel all my students the same way. Stop negotiating against yourself. As soon as you say that, you believe it's true. When I'm sitting in front of somebody selling me a house, sign this. I'll give you 3 days to look at the attorney. I'll put it in writing. And if they object, then I'll answer that objection. But if I didn't ask, they're not going to do it. You with me?
Make sure you put a deadline on how much time.
Yeah, I say 3 days. And then typically the attorney's going to call me back up and say, or they're going to change the contract and they're going to say, we want more than 3 days. Oh, I'll agree to it. I don't have a problem with it. Why do I want to go against the attorney? I want the attorney to understand that I'm the seller's friend. And the worst thing that happens, the attorney calls them and says, listen, we're canceling this deal. We don't like it. Okay. See ya.
That helps you.
Well, obviously.
In a lot of different ways, because you got the terms down already, they're somewhat committed, they spent time on it, and so they don't want to waste that time, and they gotta get an attorney within 3 days. He's right, the attorney is probably gonna ask for more time, but you started the process.
It changes the mindset of the attorney too, because now he's just looking at the details of the contract, rather than whether there should be a contract.
The conversation's different.
That's what normally happens. There is an agreement, everything's in writing on my offer, it's just not executed. You know what I mean?
Execute it and put in there.
3 or 7 day right of rescission.
Right, I would start with 3 days, and 3 days is a known entity, because in New Jersey, you have 3 days, and so it's kind of a known thing in this area. It's not considered to be unreasonable.
Yeah, all right, thanks.
And which just maybe, do we agree on this? Yes, great. This is the contract. This is what it says. Oh, I want to run it by my attorney. How many days do you need? I would ask, how many days do you need to run it by your attorney? Is 3 enough? And they're always going to say yes, because they're not even thinking about it. They think 3 days is a long time. And that's okay. I put in writing that you have 3 days to review this with an attorney. You can cancel this contract for any reason. And then it's signed. They both sign it. The attorney will either agree to the contract or not agree to the contract, and then it's good or bad.
We have another question. Tell us your name, please.
Stephen Carmen. It's really more of, I've been told, but it seems reasonable, that any contract can be assigned. So you don't have to put, your company or your name and assigns. You can just put a company or whatever you represent, and you can always assign it under federal law or something that says, you have a valid contract, you've allowed this person to execute it, maybe for some compensation, maybe not, but that doesn't matter.
Any contract can be assigned unless the contract says that it can't be assigned.
And you will find them.
And there are contracts that say that. Okay? So what you want to do if you are looking to assign a contract and you're given a contract, you want to go through and see if there's a provision that says you can't assign it. Okay?
Okay.
If the contract does not say that, then you should be able to assign it. Now, some folks, like wholesalers, they a lot of times want to put in a term that specifically says, I can assign it. You don't necessarily need to do that, because you can assign it if it doesn't say the opposite, but some people like the comfort of having it in the contract.
If the purchaser on the agreement's a land trust, then no matter who controls the trust or the beneficiary of it, it's still the land trust executing it. So I think if you do it that way, or a company that you sell or whatever, it's the company, whoever had the signature for it, whatever, committed to it, and it's going through with it. So the money's coming out of the land trust. They wouldn't know who was in that, right?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I know exactly where you're going.
Okay.
Okay, you're listening to a lot of people who are giving you a lot of different advice, and you're taking it all and you're jumbling it in your head. That what you're talking about right now, I believe, is this. If there's a contract that's not assignable, a way to assign a non-assignable contract is to put it into a trust. And if I'm the beneficiary and I'm the trustee of the trust, I can now assign the beneficial interest to you. You can then fire me as the trustee and hire yourself as a trustee. Basically, what we just did was we kept the trust the exact same way, except there's a new beneficiary and a new trustee. That's how you get around non-assignable contracts.
Right.
And yes, everyone in this panel, well, I don't know about you, Ben, but everyone in this panel who's bought houses has done this, and it works. However, you really don't need it. Now, I'm doing a lot of wholesaling also. So one of the things, I put it and or assigned to my contract, and I'll tell you why I do it. Because when the original seller goes to the closing, and my representative is there, and the new buyer's there, I want one less hassle. I don't want the seller, the original seller, to go, what's this? What's going on? What do you mean? Well, you signed here that says and or assigns, and I and or assigned it. You get it?
Yeah, but I've been lucky enough to run into agents at my end or the other end that do not want and or signs on there.
Well,
Even if I'm the end buyer and it's a cash deal, they still don't want it.
Well, let me just say that I tell clients,
Closer to the mic.
I tell clients all the time, a lot of my clients will come to me and say, they'll ask me this question about should I be buying real estate as myself or as an entity or what should I do? And they don't make that decision until the last minute, whether they're going to have it as an entity or a person. I always tell my clients, sign the contract as Mr. Joe Smith and or assigns, okay? Because that allows you, and for the most part, people don't object to that. You may have.
Why you get people objecting to it?
Yeah, and the reason is
I'm lucky.
because some.
More than once?
Yeah.
Oh, you got so.
Yeah.
I deal with realtors all the time, and I put that and or signs, and it's because my client doesn't know yet if he's going to buy it in his own name or if he's going to create an entity and buy it in that entity name. And if a realtor says to me, I'm going to say, what are you, crazy? This is the way that it's going to be, or we're not doing this deal. You know how many people do deals like that?
I know.
So I think it's an education for that particular realtor. They think you're trying to get something over on them, but you're not. You're just making a decision between now and the time you close as to who you're going to buy this.
Are you the middleman in this deal?
No. The last time I tried it, I was offering all cash, and actually I offered so much based on the condition of the house. I was glad they turned it down.
So this happened to you one time?
It happened to me out here one time, a couple times in California.
Okay, there's either you have a paperwork problem or there's something else, because this is, I mean, seriously, last month was a bad month, and we did 7 of them. So I don't understand why, with and or assigned, we assigned them all, no problem. Nobody, and I think 4 of them were on the MLS, where the agents came to us and they understand it. We have a corporate addendum that they sign, that the buyer signs, that he knows he knows we're middlemen. It spells it all out, and what his obligations are and what our obligations are. So you may want to look into the kind of paperwork you're using.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, this question is probably for Tom. So Tom, from Anonymous, whoever Anonymous is, what are the chances of getting paid from a tenant if you want a judgment and they already moved out? No forwarding address. Go find them.
I don't know what you're talking about. Never had that problem.
Well, then speculate. How would you do it?
Your best bet is to get the money up front before they move in. Check the people out. Know the quality of people that you're working with. I personally stay away from people with very good credit. They never stay. They will quickly move on, probably buy a house of their own. If not, they're picky as all hell, and they'll drive you nuts. So I'm looking for that tweener spot. You know, they pay most all their bills, but they've got hiccups on there. Income's the big thing that we're looking for. You're not allowed to, outright deny people for criminal background. That's kind of up in the air. They're deciding legally where that line is, what you can deny people for. But I don't like to see much in the way on criminal background. But
I don't understand. You cannot. You can check criminal records of people and decide by that.
you can check.
Say, I don't want anybody that has criminal records in my house. You cannot decide that.
You can say that.
Could you
Not today, you can't. Not
Tom,
flat
repeat-
out, right?
Tom, repeat the question, please.
The question was, can you deny somebody for a criminal background? I think it was last year or the year before, law was passed as far as discrimination, that you're not allowed to flat out deny people for criminal background issues. It's kind of up in the air as far as what the guidelines are. I'm not looking to see recent stuff, but there are some states where, especially out west, that they're now finding landlords who are doing criminal background checks and denying people. You're not legally allowed to in some states. Pennsylvania, fortunately, is not one. But getting back to the point, your best bet is to know who you're working with up front, collect the deposit that you need, additional deposit if you can. If they've got pets, great, you can charge additional for pets. But once you get, not on good working terms or they've got issues, it's going to be pretty difficult to collect a judgment from people that have nothing. And I've tried it over the years, and it just doesn't work. And your best bet is to get the money up front, keep on top of people, and file early, and just conduct yourself in a business-like, professional manner, not to get people upset, not to encourage them to damage the property, but just to get the property back and get it rolling again.
Yeah, if they moved out, I'm really happy. This question, the best part of that question was, and they already moved out? Yes, I don't have to deal with it anymore.
Right. There are ways,
Just to address your question about the criminal issue, it turns out that one of the biggest reasons for recidivism is failure to be able to find a place to live. And so in an attempt to deal with that problem and lower the recidivism rate, that's why they passed the law that you can't not rent to somebody on that basis.
So has that happened? This was your question?
No.
Was this your question?
This was my question.
Oh, the tenant?
So I'm going to elaborate on this because I hate texting and typing into all this stuff. So it's easier just to come up here and actually say it in a microphone.
Give us more details. Get closer to
So my tenant was there for 6 years, and she was a fantastic tenant until she lost her job, some kind of medical issues, blah, 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 whatever. So I took her to court. I won the case, and she obviously, since she was such a good tenant, I let her go for 2 months. And then after the second month, I said, no, you got to go. She moved out. I had no forwarding address. Now, for a small owner like myself, it's hard to go after a couple $1,000s. It doesn't make any sense to hire a lawyer that's going to cost me 3 or 4 times of what she owes me. So is there a way on a multi-unit, there's ways of hiring lawyers to actually, and they do this all the time, to find out where they are, to garnish wages or some other way of getting the money back?
Well,
I did go down that. Oh,
sorry.
There's always doing a skip trace.
I was going to say, there are ways to find asset. There are companies, well, you can go on the internet and try to find somebody.
And I did.
There are companies that you can hire to do that, but of course then you have to pay them money.
Closer to the mic.
And there are also there are also companies that not only will find people, but then they will search to see if you can find assets. Okay,
right.
So the question, but again, you got to pay money to hire a company to see if they can find assets of people. Another way to deal with that is you have a judgment against that person. Okay, so then you try to find where they are. You want to take that judgment and so if you had a rental property in Philadelphia and you found out that the person moved to Montgomery County. Again, to the extent that that person in the future
gets some asset, like buys a house. She gets out of debt, you want to continue to have that judgment, like, every 5 years, you want to renew that judgment and have that judgment filed in the county where the person lives, so that if they get any assets, you can have that judgment be a lien on their assets. But it becomes expensive. If it's only a couple of $1,000s, it may not be worth
You move on.
your
Yeah.
while.
And actually, Larry was right before, it's way better to have the tenant out.
That's right.
Than
Oh, I agree. I agree. Cash for
unwilling
keys
to be
sometimes.
out, then it's going to cost you a lot more money to evict them.
Yeah.
So you want the ultimate landlord line before you decide on the tenant? What's your first name?
Mike.
Mike. So I want to explain to you one more time, because I've already said this to you 4 times, by the way. I want to explain to you one more time. Rent's due on the 1st. On the 2nd, it's late. On the 5th, there's a $100 late fee. And on the 15th, I file. Let me make sure you understand, Mike, if you're in the hospital, please call me. I'm going to send you flowers. But on the 15th, I'm filing for eviction. Do we understand each other?
I'll accept those flowers. Thank you.
Why are you waiting so long to file?
What's that?
That's the
Why are you waiting so long to file?
Oh, the 15th?
You're a really nice guy.
You know what? I don't. In 30 years, I filed one time. That was it, because of that line. It amazes me how I get my rent in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, almost all the time.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on. We have a lot of questions here. What is the best way to develop an accurate model for the revenue and cost model to evaluate a rental property? Would Tom like to address that?
Sure.
Larry, you want to address that?
That's all it is, the 1% rule.
I guess if you want to do quick numbers, but devil's in the details. I would do an income statement on the property. If you're not sure what that is, basically top line is all the income that the property would be bringing in. Right below that, you want to get all your expenses down. Taxes, insurance, water, sewer, trash, lawn, snow, property management, vacancy, and then the big one is the maintenance and repair. I can't tell you how many times I put numbers down on paper to arrive at a net operating income, and then off of that you work your financing costs. And on paper it looks great, and then you go out to the house and you're like, there's no way in God's green earth I can maintain this thing for $4,000 a year. And then you recognize that you need to then go back and basically put in a renovation budget for this, and then recognize what those financing costs are going to be, and then add that back in. To give you a 3-minute answer is going to be a bit challenging. I'd be happy to sit with somebody and detail what I'm talking about. I can direct you to some resources that would probably be very helpful. Some of you may know Robert Kiyosaki from the Rich Dad, Poor Dad book series. He also has another book called The Cash Flow Quadrant, where he details a lot of particulars about an income statement and balance sheet. And that's not anything I learned in college. I learned it from doing it and having to fill out the papers that the bankers ask us to do every year, and from Robert Kiyosaki. But very good information for analyzing a property. But the big thing is using realistic numbers for especially the maintenance and the repair on a property. We do mostly multifamily, older stuff, and you have to really get out and look at the properties to see the condition, because condition drives everything.
Who asked that question? Anybody in the room? Okay, well, Don, go ahead.
Can I answer that question also? I don't think it's possible to have an accurate model for the revenue and cost. There's a lot of properties I've bought with negative cash flows. Some people say, I won't buy a house unless it's $250 a month positive cash flow. It's like, to me, that doesn't make any sense. I've bought a lot of super deals with negative cash flows. For example, I bought the 5-unit building that my office is in. That had, the rents were way low. And it was sat in the MLS. No one wanted it because the rents were so low. I knew what the rents were. I knew 3 of the 1-bedrooms I could easily make into 2 bedrooms and almost double the rent. So I bought that house one by one, kicked the tenants out, and now it's cash flowing like crazy. And once again, just looking at it on the MLS, looks like it was a big negative cash flow. Another property I bought seller financing. It was a negative cash flow, but after about 6 years, the house was paid off. You know, so I don't think you can do it. I don't think it's possible to do an accurate model of revenue because these deals no one would have bought if they would have had a model for the revenue and cost and some kind of if you threw it on an Excel spreadsheet, it wouldn't make any sense. But I made it make sense.
I'd like to add to what Don just said. Whoever asked this question, if you, as part of your deal, if you're planning to get any financing from a bank and you've already established a relationship with that bank, it's best to get the bank to give you the way they want to see that property evaluated. Every bank has a different way of looking at things, and they'll give you their analysis sheet if you ask them for it. And that way, if you fill out the sheet the way they want it filled out for them, they'll understand it. If you fill out a form the way another bank or yourself evaluated it, it may not be what the bank wants. So ask the banker, and you may have to do it for different bank, a different form for each bank, but ask the banker and they'll tell you how they want to present it. Don, have you ever done that, or probably not?
Yeah. When I deal with banks, if I have to deal with banks, they have some kind of form or something. But when you're doing like seller financing or buying a house where you can increase the rents a lot, it really doesn't. Yeah. Make sense.
Okay, so Robin Laufer, another question. Robin says, when creating a PA-based LLC that will not have any real estate. Oh, we already covered that, didn't we?
We did that already.
We already covered that. Okay. So Anonymous asks, best way to refinance your first rental, and who gives the best terms in the area? Who asked that question? Anybody in the room? Oh, come on. Somebody must have asked it. Okay. Do you want to clarify that in any way? If you do, please go to the microphone. Tell us your name and clarify.
My name is Anat, and I am new in US, and I'm a new investor, and I'm about to buy my first rental property, and I'm going to pay all of it cash, and I want to find the best way to refinance it. And I started to look at local banks and local credit unions, I think you call it that way. So I wanted from your experience.
Why do you want to pay cash for it?
Why? Just because I understood maybe it's the best way that my offer will get accepted. I apologize for my English. I'm still getting better. They say my offer will be stronger if I offer all cash.
That was your real estate agent, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Don't listen to the real estate agent. Listen to mentors. Listen to yourself.
Okay.
And you don't have to make a cash offer.
Okay. For the next one.
Oh, you did it already.
For this one, I did it already. The offer is accepted. I have a contract. Now I'm looking for a way to refinance it the best way possible, and maybe I will get your advice for the next one.
Can I ask a question?
I have somebody I would suggest you go to, but unless you have somebody.
No, well, I think what you want to do is take as much money out as you can. I guess what I would have did is bought an FHA or FHA, and then this way you only put in 2 or 3% down, and this way you have more money to use to flip houses or buy more rentals or whatever. So find a. It's probably gonna be one of these large banks and you have to go through Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. But look for someone you get 98% or 97% financing through.
Do you think somebody will give me 97%?
No.
Not now. It's refinance.
Well, all right. So this is where it's smart not to be a real estate agent. Because what he just basically did was he walked the line. And
Closer to the mic, Larry.
So an FHA deal with 3% down is for homeowners only, and that you're moving into the home. Okay, and yes.
Oh, you're not moving into the house?
No.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And yes, there are people. It's so sad that they do this. That say they're going to move into a house and don't, and get the 3% financing. Isn't that sad?
That never happens.
Never happens.
No.
Anyway, that's what I want to go to. However, so you need a refinance. So you got two issues here. One is called seasoning. So if you paid $100,000 for the house, you're probably not going to be able to finance anything more than 80%, which is still better. You're still getting some of your cash back. If you, it doesn't matter what the value is. Yeah, if you paid $100,000 for it and it's worth $500,000, you're still not going to be able to borrow any more than $80,000 for the next 6 months. Because most banks have what's called seasoning, which they want to see that you've owned the house for a little while, and then they can reevaluate it.
But some banks don't have seasoning.
Correct.
And some banks, some banks don't have seasoning.
I still have, okay, great. So yeah,
I don't remember your name. Could you get to the microphone, please? Because we want to hear your, yes, please. We want to hear your questions.
It's in English, so it takes me a process and weird and
Listen, we have,
so complicated.
We'll have Google Translate. Don't worry about it.
So, okay.
Okay, and then the second, but the second issue you're going to have is you're going to have to prove income into that house, into that unit, because they're going to add that debt in to your debt to income ratio, and if you don't have income into that unit already, then you can offset that debt. You may not qualify. It's actually easier for you to get the loan now than it will be for you to get the loan over the next 6 months. After that, it gets easier. But if these guys know places that have no seasoning, absolutely get it from them. I know a great bank, Univest Bank. Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
Univest Bank is a great bank because they'll do portfolio loans. So they do in-house underwriting, which have nothing to do with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac guidelines. I love this bank. And I found that Don actually introduced me to them. I love this bank. It's fantastic. But if these guys know people who don't do seasoning, you should go there first.
So is your problem the percentage down? Because some banks will give you 80%, 85%. How much percent do you need?
I have many questions on that because I put the offer on the LLC and then I went to Univest and to different banks and they told me if I would put it under my name, it would be easier. Because the LLC is new, because I am new in this country, and the LLC needs to be 2 years with experience of 2 years. So
yeah, find another bank.
Buy it in trust, and as the trustee, you can sign for the loan just as well, just like you own it. LLC is different. You make the beneficiary of the trust, the LLC, and as the trustee, you can sign for the loan just as if you were buying it in your name. And I know Univest does this because I just got another loan through them, and I own no properties. I'm the trustee on lots of properties.
So I will ask you later, and you will give me the details.
Yeah, closer to the mic,
more
please.
Details. No, later.
I don't want to pull away from you. No, it's fine. But if these guys know banks that don't do seasoning, you want to talk to them too. You want to find out what banks they are.
Yes.
What you should do.
I took a list of all the banks, and I found more than 40. Today I did the list.
Right.
Who I should call and check.
But
more than 40.
When is your closing? How much time do you have?
The maximum will be 2.5 months because the seller needs to find care house.
Okay.
So I have enough time.
Okay, you did this through a real estate agent?
What?
Is this through a real estate agent? Okay, this is what I want you to do. Here. I want you to call your real estate agent tomorrow and say, listen, I just want to change the owner to a trust. So if it's 123 Main Street, make it 123 Main Street Trust.
Okay.
That's fine. Talk to me afterwards. I'll tell you what to do. As soon as they do that, I want you to go back to Univest Bank or any other bank and say you're buying in a trust. Just because you say you're buying in cash doesn't mean you can't come to the closing table with a loan.
I know.
So you have so much time to find a loan that
I have a lot of time.
You don't even need the cash.
Yes. And I'm already pre-approved to have a loan.
Okay, great.
So.
Yeah, this is a lot easier to solve than you think.
Okay.
Yes. Do you have anything else to say?
Thank you. No.
Do you want another opinion?
I feel so embarrassed. What?
Did you want another opinion?
Yes.
Okay. 2.5 months is a long time.
Mm-hmm.
This
is the maximum.
Yeah, as Larry did say, yes, you've got time to go out and place financing on that. You don't necessarily have to show up with your cash. As far as putting it into a trust versus LLC, I'm just listening to what you've already got in place and not adding anything new or complicated. I prefer LLCs myself. I went down that irrevocable trust road many years ago, and it's very difficult in an irrevocable trust to get permanent financing. In a revocable trust, you can. but the advantages of a well-written dual membership LLC with a strong operating agreement they're tough to beat. There is a local bank, Hardeeville Savings Bank.
I called them today.
They will do loans, 30-year fixed rate, to entities, LLCs. They could close your loan in less than that 2.5 months.
Okay.
You would just call up Conrad Driver at Hardeeville Savings, tell him Tom sent you, he'll know who he's talking about. And
later
tell him
you
what
will
you're
give me
looking to
his
do.
name. Okay.
Yeah. Tell them what you're looking to do, and that you already have it under agreement, and you've got 2.5 months, and that's plenty of time for them to put together a loan for you to show up at closing.
Okay.
And they would want 80% down, and as Larry did say, it's a heck of a lot easier to show up with the financing, because if you close that loan, they would make you wait a year for seasoning. But with that 2.5 months, you can show up with that loan right now.
Yeah.
Actually, if you talk to Conrad, and I have, you don't need seasoning. They have 2 deals that come here. They have 2 deals, one with seasoning, one without seasoning. The seasoning,
Which bank?
Conrad Driver.
Okay, the same guy. Okay.
The with seasoning gives you a better interest rate. The without seasoning is slightly higher, but it may be worth it for you. And the 80%, they'll give you an 8%, maybe 85% if you are planning to do a lot of commercial properties. And if you need the 15 or 20% money, that's what credit cards are for, just to get things started, or friends and family to get that cash. So it's really easy to do. Just talk to Conrad. If you don't have his phone number, that's Tom or I can
I will
give
get
to
it from you. Thank you.
Is it a new LLC?
What?
Is it a brand new LLC?
It's a new LLC. It has 1 year, but nothing happened in this year.
And there's no credit for the LLC at all, right? You've never had
No,
yeah.
nothing.
So what he's saying is correct. However, you may have trouble financing through the LLC because it's so new, there's no credit through it. That's, again, so if you go to a trust and it's a trustee, it's just like you were getting a loan in your name, but it's not your name.
Yes, I will check that.
You will have to personally sign for personally guarantee it, but you can underwrite it like it's your own instead of underwriting it for the LLC.
Would you like Conrad's phone number now?
I would definitely
Sure.
want this guy.
Let me get to the next question here. Okay, somebody asked the question of a par listing contract.
Yeah, but what did they want to know?
There's no question.
That's all they wrote, par listing contract. Okay, let's move on. Explain dual agency and why seller loses agent's fiduciary responsibility since agent must now act neutral.
Okay, this is absolutely not true. The agent does not act neutral. There are certain agents who can do this very well.
Closer to the mic, Larry.
There are certain agents who can do this very well, and there's certain agents who can't do it. And really, I've explained this to my clients, that I literally divide myself in half. I'm Beth's agent, and I'm Sebastian's agent at the same time. Whatever Sebastian tells me is personal. I cannot tell Beth, who's the seller, and Sebastian's the buyer, I cannot tell, for example, I can't tell Beth what the maximum Sebastian would offer for the house would be. On the same time, I can't tell Sebastian what the maximum or the minimum Beth would take for the house. If the agent can do this properly and can do it without an ethical problem, it's great. Some agents can't handle it. They say, I know Beth will take $90,000 for it. You should offer $90,000 because they're thinking about their commission, they're thinking about selling the house, they're thinking about all the wrong reasons. What I do as a dual agent is I actually ask myself, I literally go through this exercise, and I say, if Sebastian told his agent this, would his agent tell me this? And if I can reconcile that question and get whatever the answer is, that's how I act when I tell Beth. Now, Beth may have even had I may have even had the house under contract for, let's say, for $90,000, but I can't tell Sebastian I had the house under contract for 90,000 and the deal fell apart, because technically I wouldn't tell that to the buyer agent. You with me? So even if Sebastian says, hey, do you think I should offer 90,000? I can't say, oh, I know she's going to take that. I would say, if that's what you want to offer, let's offer it. That's all I can do. If he thinks he should offer 95, I got to be really careful here, because now, whose best interest am I looking at? Am I looking after? And I may even say, yes, you should offer it. And then I say, offer it. Then I go to Beth. I go, hey, Beth, you just got 95,000. Oh, I'm sorry. Should he offer 85,000? I'm sorry. He just got an offer 85,000. Go to Beth. Say, Beth, before you got 90, why don't you try to get 95? I have to act for both best interests. I have to act individually for each one's best interest. I hope that answered the question. But make sure, if you're an agent, make sure you're doing it right. And if you're working with an agent who's working on both sides, make sure they're doing it right. Hope that answered the question. I don't know who asked it.
Yeah, I don't know who asked that question. Is that person in the room? Did you want to? Okay. Well, let's move on then. Thank you, Larry. Let's see. Okay. How can I be as smart as Larry Steinhouse? Anybody?
I thought you deleted that question.
Who would like to answer that question? Okay. Does a judgment, you're going to, no, Lynn's not going to answer that. I think we asked this already, right? Does a judgment expire? Right, we answered it already. When making an obviously lowball offer.
We did that one.
We did that one, okay. Biggest challenge with property management.
We did that one.
Okay, when acquiring a
Scroll up instead of down.
Yeah, scroll up. These are the.
Actually, well, we didn't answer this one, I don't think.
Yeah, no.
When acquiring a multifamily with rents under 30% of current market rates, what is the best strategy to raise rents to market price as quickly as possible? Who asked that question? Are you in the room? Is that correct, or do you want to add something to it? Okay. Go to the mic, please, if you want to add something.
I've done that many times. I bought a lot of multifamily properties with really low rents, and usually one at a time. Each month I'll raise the rents. And one lady I raised it $250 a month, and she stayed. I was hoping she'd move out so I can go in and rehab the unit and raise the rents even more, but she stayed. So then I went on to the next tenant, raised their rent a lot. They moved out, rehabbed the property, rehabbed that unit, and then raised the rents a lot. So I do it one at a time. But this was with a 5-unit building and a 4-unit building. I did it last. So if it was a 20-unit building, I don't know, maybe I'll do 2 at a time. But that's what I look for that. I look for that a lot. I look on the MLS for rents that are really low, where I know I could raise them a lot, because most people won't touch those properties because they don't know any better. They don't know the market.
Tom, you want to add to that?
Following up on what Don said, typically if we're looking for opportunities, what I'm looking for is things that I can change. Working with that income statement, putting those numbers on paper, recognizing what it's currently doing with its income and its expenses, and then recognizing the things that I can change and do differently. Rents is number one. That's easy, low-hanging fruit if you know your market well. But critical point, know your market. Next thing is separating heat and hot water. That's the other biggie right there. This recent property we're working on in Souderton, 6 units, rent's extremely low, and making improvements to the units to get the higher rents. One we did last year in Bethlehem was a combination of everything from rents were way low to separating heat, separating hot water, and making the improvements to the building. That's all I'm looking for. I want to find something that I can do different, and I get really excited when I can find a property that I can do 2 or 3 changes to improve rather than just one. The more things that I can change and do different, the more interested I am. I'm not really that concerned about price. Condition, not really that concerned about either, because that would just give me an incentive to pay less, and then I can make it how I want it, and it just lets me go in and throw everything out, including all the people that are there, unfortunately. But in some instances, it's the best thing for them because they're actually one place, it really wasn't structurally safe. And I said that to them. I showed them in the basement where the building had dropped like 6-8 inches because of, under supported beams and things like that. But making those changes, I'd rather have the building empty from the get-go, fix everything I can up front. I then go back to the bank with a new and improved value, borrow at 80% loan to value. The game is try to get all back or even a little bit more. On the bigger buildings, never got everything back and then some. The small little houses, we've gotten money. We got paid to take the houses after we fixed them and renovated them. For the larger buildings, we've walked out with leaving maybe 10, 15, 20% in them at the most, but they're fully renovated and fully occupied with the new value. So the more things you can change, the more things you can do different, the better the deal can be.
Does that answer your question?
But it brings up another question. So the strategy you were saying, right? So you say sometimes...
Get closer to the mic, please.
Sometimes you'd go and you kick everybody out and you add value, right, by doing some of these renovations. But then if you try to go, let's say, refi or try to get a loan on this property or asset that now has a higher valuation because of the improvements you put in it, but it's unoccupied, how do you peg it with a cap rate to get the appropriate valuation, to get the appropriate cash out?
I don't really pay much mind to cap rates because I'm looking at cash flow. Cap rates I've found when investment firms and realtors put those together, they leave so many things out of those that it's really not accurate. And the biggest thing they leave out on it is the condition of the property and are you able to actually maintain this thing for that? I'd rather have something that I can make right from the get-go because I'm keeping it to the day I die. So there's no point in bubble gum and baling wire. Make it right. And as far as getting it refied, yeah, you have to have it fully occupied. So the one in Bethlehem, it was a year. It was $150,000 in renovations on a $300,000 we paid for it, but it appraised for $540,000. So we got most everything back that we put in it. We were left with almost the 20% that we put down of the 300 in, but we got all that refi money back or the repair money back. So we got 30-year fixed rate, 25-year amortized loan on all the renovation money. The buildings, everything's right in it, everything's new, nobody's moved, and the rents are current market. If it works out as well as the 12 unit did the other year, I've got a tax problem again because I don't have expenses because everything's fixed and I got 25-year amortization on the repairs. It doesn't pay to be short-sighted. It doesn't pay to be cheap. Aesthetics is one thing. We make it decent. We don't this new one in Souderton we're making really nice, but for Bethlehem, it's a basic rental market. We make it structurally, mechanically, electrically, aesthetically clean, right, maintenance-free. As far as aesthetics, they're going to beat the heck out of the place. So I'm putting things in that wear well, and if we're just left with paint and fixing some things, that's our ideal. Controlling the expenses and your costs and vacancy is the key to having the successful ongoing income. If you're trying to be cheap up front and don't want to spend the money to fix the thing right from the get-go, you won't make a dime because you're going to spend all your money out of pocket fixing stuff when you could have done it up front and got 25-year amortization and a 5-year rate review on all that money. It's just my opinion.
Does that answer your question? Are you involved in a project now where you're trying to deal with this?
Yeah.
And does that answer your question? Okay. Okay. Are there any other questions? Did you want? Yeah. Please come up. Tell us your name to the microphone.
Hi, my name is Michael. This is a 20-part question. If you're a one-person LLC in the city of Philadelphia, flips a property, and you did the work on the property yourself, but you didn't have your Philadelphia business license or contractor's license or state contractor's license, and or you didn't get permit for electric and plumbing and you get sued. The roof collapses, the plumbing bursts, and then you have electrical fire. You know, I have 5 years down the road, so there's statute of limitations. How much money does your LLC need to defend against a lawsuit? How much trouble you're in if you didn't have your contractor's licenses?
Put your head between your legs and kiss your ass.
Yeah.
Goodbye. Seriously.
Yeah, in Pennsylvania, I'm sorry, did you say Philadelphia?
In Philadelphia.
Yeah. So I guess it depends on what kind of insurance you have on the property and what your deductible is and whether your insurance company is going to cover you.
So this is for a flip. So should it be unoccupied during the flip, or
So
this would be
who's
after the
suing you?
the person that bought the house after, like 5 years down the road or 2 years down the road after the house was bought and sold?
Is there statute of limitations?
So I will tell you that if you are not if the person who's suing you is not the person who you sold to, okay, it's a different person. You said 5 years down the road. Is it the same person who you sold it to?
Yeah, this is all hypothetical. So say a year down the road, the person that bought the house from the realtor that
All right.
you used
so the
to sell the
statute
house.
of limitations for a contract action, okay? So you sold it to someone, so you have a contract with the person who's suing you, and so the lawsuit is under the contract, okay? The statute of limitations is typically 6 years, okay? So
From when the accident occurred?
from when they knew or should have known that they had this liability. So you're probably within the statute if you're talking about a contract action, okay? If it's what we call a tort action, which is you didn't have a contract, it's the party thereafter or something, and they're suing you on, negligent. You were negligent. That statute of limitations is typically 2 years. So just to give you an idea of statute of limitations, okay? But to go back to your kind of overall general question, which is, you didn't have the proper permits, obviously you have a lot of risk because in Philadelphia, you are required to have those permits. Okay, you're required to be licensed as a contractor, and you're required to have all those permits, and you can have, you can be fined on, on a daily basis for not having those things. But you always have to think about what is the lawsuit in front of you, and are these fines ever going to be? Are you ever going to have to face these fines? Because it depends on the particular lawsuit. So it's hard to answer in this very general 20-part question analysis. I would have to know the specific question to answer the specific answer.
Hopefully there never is.
Yes, hopefully there never is.
Okay. And how much money, on average, you think you should have set aside to defend against have your LLC defend against a lawsuit?
Lots. Yeah, you have to. So there's two parts to. There's two ways to answer that question. One is if you have that property in an entity, and that entity, and you are compliant and make sure that your personal assets are separate and apart from that entity, okay? And that entity is something, you only own that property in that entity. There's no other assets. You don't have, 5 different properties. You only have one property, okay? Maybe you have no money, because maybe what you say is, as long as I know they can't come after me, I don't care about the real estate, okay? I'm, if it's $1 million lawsuit and they're coming after my entity, as long as they can't get to me, I'll give them the property, all right? That's one way to think about it. If the property is worth a lot of money and you really want to maintain that property, such that you want to have money to, the more money you have in the LLC, the more money somebody's going to be able to go after. So you have to think about it from that stretch. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Making sense to you?
Yeah.
Can he retroactively get permits?
Say that again?
Can he retroactively get permits after the project's been worked on?
Well, again, it depends on you can retroactively get permits, but that may not solve the problem, because the problem may be that you didn't do the appropriate thing to begin with. And so that may not solve the problem, and it probably wouldn't solve the problem after the fact.
But to maintain the integrity of the LLC, wouldn't the LLC have to pay the attorney's fees?
If you defend, I mean, whenever you have a lawsuit, you always have to do this cost-benefit analysis. How much is it going to cost me to defend this lawsuit? And is it worth it? Okay, so you're going to, at the time, you're going to say, all right, the property is worth $100,000. The lawsuit's going to cost me $50,000. What do I do? And that's the analysis you have to go through. The property is worth $30,000. The lawsuit's going to cost me $50,000. I'm not doing anything, as long as I know I'm protected. So you always have to go through that analysis when you're sued. Okay, and obviously sometimes there's a different, you have reputation. There are other things that come into it, but.
And factor in, you could pay all those attorney's fees, you could still lose.
Well, and that's the issue. That's the issue. Right.
How?
So your question about how much money should you have in an LLC?
No, the question is, on average, what would it cost to defend yourself against a lawsuit?
Okay, so okay. If you have a lawsuit in Philadelphia Common Pleas Court, okay, which any lawsuit that is more than $15,000 in Philadelphia, small claims court is $15,000 or less. Okay, so if the lawsuit is more than $15,000, it's going to go to Philadelphia Common Pleas Court. Okay, I will tell you that it is, and then the amount to defend a lawsuit depends on the complexity of that lawsuit. I will tell you that it is easy to have a lawsuit $10,000, and if the lawsuit is complex, it can easily be $50,000. And I would have to understand specifically what the lawsuit is to give you a better range. But I see lawsuits all the time that are easily, 20, 30, 40, 50,000. I'll defend them. Just to defend. I'm not talking about the judgment afterwards. I'm talking about just to pay your legal fees.
What's the average hourly rate in Philadelphia now for a litigation attorney?
With no guarantee of winning, by the way.
That's correct. So I charge my rate now that I'm a solo practitioner, okay, is $350 an hour. For dig, I discount it to $300 an hour. And when I was at a firm in Philadelphia, my rate was $600 an hour. Okay, so now the firms in Philadelphia, Center City, Philadelphia, I mean, your rate is going to be, could be $400 to $700 an hour. Now,
Okay.
you're not, as a small business, you're not going to go hire that kind of law firm. You're going to hire a small law firm who, like I said, easily $300, $350 an hour.
So would my LLC also be carrying insurance if I'm flipping houses? Would my LLC be carrying, I guess it's an umbrella policy? Is that what you call it for insurance?
Well, you want to make sure. I mean, you want to make sure that you're properly insured. So if you're flipping houses, you want to make sure, and you're going to have. I mean, then the question is, what's the value of your houses? If you have a portfolio of houses that is worth $2 million, you're going to want to make sure you have an insurance coverage for the value of your houses.
Okay.
Why are you worried about getting sued?
Just trying to cover all my bases.
Are you doing anything that you think you should be sued for?
I'm doing nothing.
Then don't worry about it.
All right, thanks.
I did have a follow-up.
What you should worry about is make sure you get permits and make sure you work with licensed contractors. That's what you got to do. Is that right? Is that right, guys?
And the other thing is, just to get back to one part of your 20-part question, is if you do not have a business license in Philadelphia, okay, and you get sued in Philadelphia, you cannot counter-sue if you do not have a business license. And one of the strategies when you get sued is you may want to sue the party who's suing you. If you don't have a business license in Philadelphia, you can't do that. Now, you can retroactively get a business license. It's just the timing in terms of countersuing. You'd have to make sure you did it before your time period to countersue was up. So I just bring that up as part of your 20-part question.
All right, it's 10 minutes after 9. Are there any urgent must-answer questions before we leave? You have one, Robin? Oh, you did? Okay, excuse me. From Robin, what search techniques do you recommend for first-time multifamily buyers greater than 12 units? When you say buyers, what site are you referring to?
We want to buy.
Okay, so you're going to buy the multi-unit. Okay, you mean you're looking for a project. Okay, for a multi-unit project.
I guess what I would do is I would go on Trend and pull off a list of all people who own 12 units or more in Bucks and Montgomery counties or wherever you want to buy. I mean, you can get that list for free off the Trend. You just need access to Trend, which you can get from a realtor.
And what does she do with that list?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. And then send them letters. I would send them letters every single month until they call you and say, stop sending me letters, or I'm ready to buy. I'm ready to sell. I would send them every single month.
Yeah, we get yellow letters to buy our house, and we call them up and say, send a check.
Did you have a follow-up question?
They don't usually send the check.
No, I'm just curious what other.
That's what I would do.
I had noticed that in that market with the bigger buildings, there's an awful lot of competition in that right now. I also noticed that it does go in cycles. Just a few years ago, there really was not a lot of interest in that. And we were able to find some bigger properties like that. And then the market changed. One of the things that seemed to work out for us, we had done some direct mailing, but most recently, we actually were referred by a banker with another one of their clients, and they connected us. They said, you guys have a lot in common. We have the same interests, similar personalities. He's about 10 or 15 years older than I am. He's looking to get out, and we got along great. We're just buying his stuff.
Does that answer your question, Robin? Okay. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's a little after 10 after 9. What I'd like to do to wrap up is ask each of our panel members to sort of give us a 1 minute or 1.5 minute summary of what they learned tonight and what suggestions or advice they'd like to give the audience. So we'll start with Larry again, and we'll end with Marty.
I'm super excited that there are banks out there that don't do seasoning. You know, is it new?
No, I did it a couple of years ago.
Wow, because every bank I went to was concerned with seasoning. So that's fantastic.
So you learned something.
So yeah, and so if you guys didn't learn something, I learned something tonight, which I thought was phenomenal. And I will be giving Conrad a call just to introduce myself to Conrad, even though I don't have a problem.
I'll tell him to block you.
What? You tell him to block me? Oh yeah.
So is that your summary, Larry?
Sorry, I'm still getting over Tom, you know.
Okay. So give us your summary, and what advice would you give the audience from your perspective?
Biggest thing is stop worrying about lawsuits. Listen, don't worry about what can go wrong. Worry about what can go right. I tell you what will go wrong if you keep worrying about what will go wrong. You will live a mediocre life if you keep worrying about what goes wrong. You will live an exciting life if you let things go wrong. Believe me, a lot of the lessons that all of us have learned were from letting things go wrong. You know, from my very first property that I bought when I was 18 years old, and I called the landlord and said, hi, can you tell me about Mr. Jones? And he goes, oh, he's the perfect tenant. That was the very first lesson I ever learned, was that the landlord you're talking to wants to get rid of the tenant. He's only going to say good things. So from there, I learned how to talk to landlords. So that was my first mistake. And of course, you realize that they paid their rent one time and never paid their rent again. And then I learned how to talk to landlords. So make mistakes. It's okay. And look, you know, if you're worried about getting sued, don't worry about getting sued. That's believe it or not, yeah, I mean, I've been sued a few times, and I've either won every case or settled it for such a ridiculously low amount of money that I actually laughed at the fact that somebody wasted their time suing me on it. So don't worry about it. It's not important. Don't worry about mistakes. Don't worry about tenants not paying. Just know how to try to avoid that from happening. The guy who waited 2 months before he filed, don't wait 2 months before you file. Tom's yelling at me because I waited 15 days. Imagine that, right? I'm telling you, 15 days on your file. He's saying, what do you do? File 6 or 7 days?
Today.
Okay, there you go. He's on the 7th. He's filing already. And you know what? I got to tell you something. Yeah, I got a tenant who did first time they're late, and it's the 7th, and she sent me a text message yesterday. She's going to deposit a check in my bank account today. I didn't see it go in. I'm considering filing tomorrow, even though it's not the 15th. So just understand, just keep going, and you'll do well at this business. It's fun.
I'm just going to say that it always amazes me the fact that the DIG members are willing to help other folks and impart their knowledge, as the folks here did today. And the folks in the audience, you know, you should seek out mentors like these folks, because the folks in DIG are exceedingly willing to help others, because they were helped by, you know, folks when they came up. Definitely. And so my advice to everyone is to seek, if you're just starting, or even if you've been in the industry for some period of time, to look for folks who will help you seek out a group of mentors that you can go to. And in DIG, there are numbers of people that will volunteer to help you out. Seek out those folks and keep asking questions, because you'll learn. And obviously, you guys are the ones I'm preaching to the choir, because you came to this event. But obviously, continue to do that.
Yeah, I've been in this business 32 years. There's nothing I'd rather do than real estate. I love the business. I love talking real estate. So I always offer. I offer at the Genius Bar here. I tell people, take my card. If you ever have any questions about real estate, I don't charge anything at all. I'll answer your question, because I just love talking real estate. Nothing I'd rather be doing. People bring business opportunities to me all the time. Like, no. Real estate, real estate, real estate. That's all I do. That's all I'll ever want to do. If you ever have any questions, you can take my card, call me.
I was amazed at the amount of legal advice that we were given tonight. I thought it was great. A lot of good, solid information on entities, structures, and real in-depth answers, and exploring a lot of personal situations as far as possible legal scenarios, and got some good information out there for people.
Well, I learned tonight that apparently nobody has any questions about private lending. And I suppose that's a good thing. And I echo the comments that have already been made. I mean, that's one of the things that I love so much about this organization, is the people in it, and that they're so willing to give of their knowledge and their expertise and their experience. We've learned a tremendous amount. I mean, we never flipped a property, and at our age, we likely never will. But boy, have we learned a lot about this whole industry and what goes on in it, and the people that are associated with it. And we're very proud to be a member of the community. And I'm going to give you something to learn tonight. You're going to learn that next week, Don and I will be celebrating our 39th anniversary.
If we make it the next week, that is.
It's a real lesson in perseverance.
Okay, I'd like to just add one item in my summary for tonight, and that is for those people who are worried about finding money for your deal, don't worry about finding money for your deal. I assure you, if you got a good deal, there's plenty of money available, whether it's through private lending, through banks, through credit cards, through friends or family, through partnerships. I promise you, if you've got a deal that works, and of course that's the trick, there's plenty of money available for you. So don't worry. The money's the last thing, although you should certainly make your relationships ahead of time, but the money's the last thing. The first thing is make sure the deal works, and sit down with any one of us to go through your deal, make sure that the numbers work, and whether it's a renting deal or a flipping deal or what have you, the people on the panel have lots of years of experience that'll help you with that. So I think with that as a final comment, I'd like to ask each of us to give the panel a great round of applause. Thank you very much, guys.